Welcome to Trustworthy AI Chronicles, where we explore the cutting edge of AI security, ethics, and innovation. My name is Dr. Ihsen Alouani from the Center for Secure Information Technologies at Queen's University Belfast. Join me to uncover the risks, share the breakthroughs, and spotlight the people shaping the future of trustworthy AI.
In this episode, Professor Judy Williams, Pro-Vice Chancellor for Education at Queen's, shares her vision for how AI is transforming teaching, learning, and the student's experience, and how universities can adapt responsibly to this new era.
Hello, Judy. Thank you very much for joining me today in the Trustworthy AI Chronicles. Probably let's start the episode by going through your journey.
Perfect, of course. So my career has always been rooted in a belief that education transforms lives, not just through knowledge, but through opportunity and belonging. So I did my PhD at Southampton University before moving up to the University of Manchester, working with AstraZeneca on cures for cancer. And it was here that I found a passion for teaching and moved into leadership roles where I could help shape the systems that enable great learning to happen. So at Queen's, as Pro-Vice Chancellor for Education and Students, I lead our Education and Skills Strategy 2030. And that's about creating a learning environment that's inclusive, flexible and future-focused. In other words, preparing our students for a world that is changing ever faster than ever.
It certainly is. Thanks very much, Judy. Before going into the details of AI and education, I want to first have your thoughts more broadly on the impact of AI, probably generative AI particularly, because that's what people know from AI really, at least at the global scale, let me say. How do you conceive its role in society's future?
Oh goodness, well I think AI is a defining technology of our time. It's not just about automation, it's about augmentation and how we extend human capability. The key is humanising it. Education, therefore, has a vital role to play in making sure that AI serves society by developing people who can think critically, act ethically, and most importantly, use technology wisely.
This whole podcast is about trustworthy AI and the trustworthiness aspect. And it is really, some of the topics are really challenging, and one of them are the education piece. And I was really honestly looking forward to this specific episode, mainly because as a faculty myself, I am struggling with the questions around education, the role of AI, how I make sure my students are actually learning what they should be learning, but also thinking, am I really not missing the point in this sense? Maybe even the learning outcomes need to evolve. Anyway, lots of questions we're going to ask. Let me just drop them all at once. So first of all, many describe AI in education as a paradigm shift. How do you think to which extent this is true, and how is it really reshaping the teaching, the learning, the assessment?
So I hear what you're saying here, and many people are struggling with that question. And many people describe AI in education as a paradigm shift. And I have to agree. It represents a real genuine transformation from uniformity to personalisation. As a disabled educator, it really is transformative for me. AI allows us to tailor learning to the needs of each individual, freeing educators from some of the more routine aspects of teaching so they can focus on the mentoring, the creativity and that human connection. So at Queen's, for example, we've developed tools like Feedback Finesse, which helps students to interpret and act on the feedback more effectively. And when students understand their feedback, they grow in confidence and can perform better. And it's that kind of empowerment we want technology to really enable. Of course, as with any powerful tool, there are potential downsides. And AI can also offer an easy shortcut, an answer without understanding that risks undermining and the process of learning, the thinking, the exploring and the reflecting that make education really meaningful. So ultimately, the impact of AI is not predetermined. Its potential both positive or negative, depends on how we use it. So that's why the role of educators remains central to shape the learning environments where AI supports, rather than replaces, deep learning and human growth.
Well, thanks very much, Judy. I think one of the aspects is, are we in need, as part of this shift that is happening, maybe not even kind of where at the receiving end, in the sense of every update of every new model is actually impacting us without having too much of a control on it. If you could have any reflections about probably what are the most vulnerable parts of the traditional education model or system, I would say, that is in need of transformation. I'm, for example, thinking about our learning outcomes. Say, if I'm teaching software development, or I'm teaching AI, then that's tricky, right? I'm teaching AI security, and sometimes I look at coursework definition. I would say, it's not that I would say, I am sure because I tried it. ChatGPT or whatever state-of-the-art model is capable of having 100% on it. And so I'm kind of questioning the whole thing right now.
Absolutely. And therefore, things do need to change. And my answer to this is assessment. Assessment needs to change without question. So for too long, we've relied on standardised exams that measure recall rather than understanding. And AI now offers a real opportunity to rethink this. And yes, it's a challenge, but it's one that we need to rise to. And think about assessing creativity, problem solving, ethical reasoning, and the ability to apply knowledge in authentic contexts. But this isn't just about what we assess. It's about how we talk about learning itself. We need more meaningful conversations with our learners about the journey that they're on, recognising that this is a process. The engagement and the practice that builds mastery is not just the final submission. So in other words, the shift we need is cultural as well as structural. From assessing what students can reproduce to valuing how they think, how they explore, and then ultimately how they grow.
Interesting, the different aspects that you're mentioning. But what about so you mentioned the assessment, but also the educators themselves. How do you see their role evolving in such fast-moving, very new, very evolving education environment?
Absolutely. And so this is where the educator becomes less of the deliverer of content, as you say, in that fast-moving, ever-evolving. And instead of delivering the content, they're more of a designer of learning. So in a world where information is abundant and fast-moving, what matters most is guiding students to question, to interpret, and use AI responsibly. So it's a shift from being the expert in the room to being the lead learner. Modelling curiosity and discernment is absolutely key skills moving forward.
I like the aspect of probably what do you say, first learner or the
lead
learner. So yeah, we're kind of in a journey all together with our students. That's very interesting. If we want to be a little bit more practical, if I am assessing students, there are two ways. Either I am going to say, well, there is absolutely no possibility of using generative AI. And sometimes it just does not make sense because we are preparing them to go into the job market and they will be potentially using them. So there is really not, sometimes at least, not so much of a point to prevent that or to prohibit that. But at the same time, if the students are allowed to use generative AI particularly, this also blurs the limits of what they are learning and what is regurgitated by an AI model. So the risks of misuse or the risks of even hallucination, I had experience with coursework with totally fabricated references that do not exist. And so how do you think we could ensure that AI is responsibly used in learning environment. By the way, I mentioned the example from a student's perspective, but probably also from our perspective as educators.
Absolutely. And responsible use, both from staff and students, is absolutely key. And responsible use of AI has been central to our approach here at Queen's. And we've embedded ethical principles such as transparency, inclusivity, and accountability into everything that we do. And we actively involve both students and staff in shaping those policies, because trust grows through participation, not prescription. And as you say, it's really difficult to stop people from using it, because you want them to develop the skills that they need to be effective in the workplace. And we have a responsibility to teach our students how to do that ethically, and teach our staff as well. That said, we recognise that this is a journey. There's still work to do in developing a shared set of values that can guide how staff and students use AI in practice. And we've developed a newly established AI working group that's taking this forward, ensuring that our approach evolves with reflection, collaboration and care. It's a tricky road to go on, but let's go on it together.
Again, let me ask a more practical question. If students are using AI tools in, say, their assessments, what's the frontier between educators assessing something that is representative of learning process, even from our perspective, to have an idea of this whole exercise of transmitting information and knowledge is actually working, because assessment ultimately is about transmitting and collaboratively either from creating and discussing knowledge. And the risk of students going through this whole exercise and not necessarily having or acquiring the learning outcomes we're hoping for.
So this is about literacy and clarity. And if we have the principle that we absolutely want students to use AI, but use it well, that means two things to us. Firstly, using AI well in the sense of producing high quality informed work. Understanding where the information comes from, recognising its limits and applying it with academic integrity. And if we can teach students that, then we'll get away from those examples that you say where students are using it and creating stuff that doesn't make sense or isn't real or practical. But just as importantly, it's about using AI as a learning tool, one that enriches thinking rather than replaces it. So when students or staff use AI to explore different perspectives, test their understanding, or refine their writing, it can deepen engagement and insight. So used thoughtfully, AI becomes a partner in learning rather than a shortcut around it. Now, as a disabled member of staff, I use AI to help me start things, and then I will critically analyse them to develop them and grow them. And so for me, it's been really a great, powerful tool of levelling. And I have disabled children as well. And so together, we are using it in ways to really shape our learning and move it forward. So our guidance here at Queen's goes beyond lists of what's permitted or prohibited. It's about developing the critical and ethical literacy of our students so that they can make good judgments, to use AI not just effectively, but wisely.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and thank you for sharing this. Just before moving on to the next question, I wanted to, going back to our whole paradigm of education, maybe also we need to redefine what do we want the students to learn. You mentioned this earlier. You mentioned, for example, creativity as potentially a learning outcome. So if I am teaching a module, probably it pushes me to think kind of a higher level, a meta-learning, if I want to use this word, where I want the student to learn a kind of a higher level of educational outcome that goes beyond knowing, but also knowing how, know how in a sense.
Yeah, for me, this then links to Bloom's taxonomy of learning. And instead of those lower levels of knowledge recall or interpretation, we're taking it right up to those higher levels of the pyramid.
Probably straight away a little bit too fast, isn't it? At least probably that's the challenge if we have AI in the loop. So let me say, the reason why I'm asking this is, for example, I want the students to be able to accelerate, for example, coding or the experiments or things like that. But at the same time, I want to make sure that without generative AI, they are still capable of doing the basic stuff. The risk for me is to train people being capable of using generative AI for doing good stuff, but not necessarily knowing the details.
Yeah. So this is where then, as an educator, you can bring back to basic knowledge is in the classroom, where AI is not there. So you've got that fundamental basis and understanding, but then you're using AI to accelerate and enhance this. When I'm in the classroom setting, I will go back to pen and paper. And it's really basic, but it's, for PhD students, being able to articulate clearly what their question is. What is it that their PhD is really addressing or taking forward can be a challenge. And being able to put pen to paper and talk through that with colleagues, it really helps to embed it. Now, I'm old enough to have done my PhD before the internet was ever available. And I would never say to somebody now, don't use the internet. And I think we'll get to a stage where we have the same conversation about AI. And it is about a paradigm shift, and it's also about a cultural shift to say, actually, do you know what? This is how I'm recalling all of that information. And in AI, it's got over 1 trillion nodes of information, so much that I would never have in my lifetime time to read all of that. But with the right prompt engineering, with the right question asked, I can recall that information and make those neurological links in my head. So as a learner, it's about the connections that information makes to my base knowledge that really helps to drive me forward and become creative, become that intellectual and excited learner.
That's very interesting. And thanks for mentioning the communication. I think it is key in the sense of probably generative AI could accelerate many tasks, but the very fundamental aspect of us as human is our ability or capability of communicating ideas. And I think that's probably the way forward, to probably put more emphasis on the capability or the ability of students or learners in general to convey their ideas and messages in a clear manner.
Well, that sits into the pedagogy of personalised and social learning, from adult learners. So it's ways in which you use technology to really, in a pedagogically sound way, to promote learning and bring all of this together so that those neurological connections are made, whether that's through personalised learning, social learning, or active learning, experiential learning. It's how do you integrate technology in a way that really helps students to learn and accelerate their learning? And that, for me, is the key. So I was an early adopter of AI, and I brought it into my teaching back in January 2023. And I was teaching clinical scientists at the time, very, very amazing colleagues who worked for the NHS and were doing professional doctorates. And I brought it into my teaching and introduced it, got them to use it, and brought it into my assessment. And they were like, oh my goodness, are we really allowed to do this? And I'm there going, yes, because why would I have a tool that I didn't introduce you how to ethically use it? And it was so helpful for you to actually be effective in your career, communicate effectively to your colleagues across natural boundaries, and really accelerate at speed. So I brought it in, I trained it, I use it, and I help people to then use it ethically and responsibly.
Fantastic. As part, you mentioned earlier the feedback finesse tool. it is actually a fascinating example of AI in practice. What insights have you drawn from student feedback or adoption so far? And how do you see it scaling? If you see it scaling or evolving, how would you see that?
Oh my goodness. Firstly, students really value it. They tell us it helps them to unpack academic feedback. The kinds of comments that sometimes feel a bit brief or cryptic or a bit rude to them when time pressures mean that staff have to be concise. So feedback finesse takes that existing feedback and without changing its substance, expands it into something more supportive, constructive and actionable. A little bit more compassion behind it. It's really interesting. When I've done this with staff, they said, but I wouldn't write feedback like that. And I say, that's the point. You don't need to. The tool will do that for you. But it's how the students interpret and use it that's absolutely key here. And what's been powerful is seeing how this helps both sides. For students, it makes feedback clearer, more encouraging, turning it into genuine learning tool rather than a judgment. And for colleagues, it saves time when magnifying the impact of their feedback, ensuring that even short comments have depth and meaning when students engage with them. So importantly, it's not about replacing the human connection between student and teacher. It's about how AI can amplify it. Using AI to make that feedback more personable, more understandable, and ultimately more effective.
That's interesting because the last sentence you mentioned, using AI, a machine to make our feedback more human. That's actually very interesting. I don't know if it is an oxymoron or not, but anyway, that's what's happening.
But this is the power of AI because I can tell it how I want to receive the feedback, and then I can use it so that the feedback given to me it lands with me. And so this is the personalisation piece that actually enables me as an academic to personalise it to each and every one of my students. And if I've got small class sizes, it's easy for me to do that and time effective myself. But when my class sizes grow and I have classes of 100, 200, 300 students, being able to personalise my feedback, understand the needs of each of my students and use AI to do that so that they're telling me and I'm then with my feedback finesse tool doing that, it's really powerful.
You mentioned the scale, the number of students, etc. But even if I take the example of PhD students, which it might be a one-to-one meeting, and I think this is very helpful in the sense of balancing us wanting to be supportive and at the same time we want the students, at the end of the day, it's 3 years, it is too short for a student to learn rigorous research methodology and being extremely precise, extremely rigorous, at the same time extremely innovative to make their way to publications and so on. And sometimes the balance between us wanting a higher bar of rigorous research methodology, but at the same time being supportive to the student, probably that's one of the best advantages that we could take.
Absolutely. So throughout my career, I've always supported PhD students. And if I take us back a few years, at one point I was supporting nearly 7,000 PhD students. And I could recall horror stories of where that relationship between the student and the supervisor breaks down. And a lot of that is down to poor communication and a mismatch between expectations. This is where AI can really come in to bridge some of the gap between a supervisor's expectation of what motivates individual students together with what actually motivates the student that they have. Because often, and I can think back to my own PhD supervisor, they used techniques that motivated them, didn't motivate me. Whereas actually, with AI, I could put something now into a system and change that feedback so it was tailored to motivate me, to really enhance, to improve, to have the specificity or the precision that was needed, but to really do it in a way that was constructive rather than destructive, which is what sometimes happens.
Absolutely. In terms of norms and policies for AI, to what extent do you think universities should kind of be proactive in setting norms and policies instead of just waiting for regulations to happen?
Oh, we absolutely need to lead. Universities are places of exploration and ethical reasoning. It's all part of our public mission, so waiting for regulation is too passive. And so we have a duty to model what trustworthy innovation would look like.
On the same line, but now we're going to focus a little bit more on Queen's strategy particularly. So Queen's is a part of the JISC Digital Transformation Pilots, which is Joint Information Systems Committee. If you could tell us about this committee, what is it exactly? But from Queen's perspective, how has that collaboration influenced your AI strategy and roadmap?
Okay, so JISC is, for those of you not familiar, it's the Higher Education Digital Transformation Group. Think of it as the digital NHS equivalent in higher education. So from a Queen's perspective, our collaboration with JISC has been incredibly valuable. Through JISC, we've been able to benchmark our digital maturity, explore safe uses of learning analytics, and share best practice across the sector. It's really helped us to refine our roadmap for AI, making sure innovation always sits alongside ethics and inclusion, because accessibility underpins everything that we do here.
Yeah, and on the same kind of line of efforts, you released recently guidance on using AI in assessment, particularly if you go back to assessment. Can you walk us through the core ideas of this guidance?
Absolutely. So the central message to the guidance is clarity and confidence. So we want both staff and students to understand how AI can be used constructively while maintaining academic integrity. And our guidance sets out clear expectations and principles for responsible use so that everybody knows where they stand. But this work also connects to a broader shift in how we think about curriculum and assessment. So it's not only about ensuring integrity in the age of AI, it's about strengthening validity and authenticity, designing assessments that reflect the kinds of skills and thinking students need for the future, for employment. So in that sense, AI isn't just something to safeguard against. It's also a catalyst for deeper reform, prompting us to ask what and how we truly value in learning.
Yeah, so this shift that is happening, as you mentioned in assessment, there is a part of it that generally is a little bit overlooked sometimes, which is the inclusion part. So some of our students, or even faculty, are with disability or with additional needs, especially for students, for learners. How do you ensure inclusion and accessibility under all this changing and rich and sometimes challenging environments?
So here at Queen's, student success is all about enabling every student to thrive and reach their potential. So with that in mind, inclusion isn't negotiable. AI can be transformative for learners with additional needs. I've already said, for me personally, I use it day in, day out because I'm severely dyslexic, and it gives me the confidence that maybe I didn't have when it was just pen and paper. So for instance, through adaptive interfaces or real-time translations, our students are using these to really gain confidence and build ability. But we also have to be vigilant. So every pilot at Queen's goes through an inclusive impact review to make sure new technologies narrow gaps rather than widen them.
In a context where everything is changing, or AI is actually changing almost everything, we are, as I mentioned earlier, in the receiving side of new technologies, new versions, new capabilities of those systems and models. Now, what needs to change from our perspective, for example, institutionally? What institutional shifts, what policy shifts, what cultural infrastructure most universities have to embrace for a trustworthy AI future, or AI for good in the future, especially from an education perspective?
Oh my goodness, there's a lot that needs to change. So we really need to rethink policies, modernise our infrastructure, and invest in staff development. But perhaps most importantly, we need a cultural shift from that fear of AI to critical curiosity. And that's when genuine innovation will happen.
Fear of AI, I think this is a paradigm that I don't think AI is like any other technology or new technology that we had. It's not like the calculator, even though people sometimes give this example. I think it is much more fundamental and much different. But at the same time, I agree with the fact that the solution is not to cripple ourselves and say, well, just to reject it or not to use it.
Absolutely.
It's probably more embrace it more bravely, even though it is challenging.
Now, you might hear from my voice, I'm no spring chicken. And so, absolutely. And even the old lady Luddite in me needs to embrace it because it's going to be critical for our student employability moving forward. They need to know how to use this ethically, responsibly, and with care. And I think our education here needs to empower them to do that and give them the skills and the confidence to do this well while they're here in the safe environment of a university setting, to be able to then fly when they go out into employment and feel comfortable and confident. And in some instances, they will be leading the businesses, the industries, the NGOs that they're going to work in. They will be the expert because we as university have trained them well.
That's very interesting because it also opens the question, if we as university or as academics want to provide this environment, this safe but also very well thought, forward-looking, aware of what's happening environment for students in the way that our pedagogy works, our classes are set up, our assessments are done. But how, if I might ask your thoughts about how should educator training evolve to equip our faculty with necessary tools and frameworks and skills to address this challenge?
That's a really good question. So my view is that every educator needs a basic AI fluency. Not to become a technologist, but to understand how AI affects their discipline and, importantly, their teaching. So at Queen's, we're building this into our academic development programmes. So we've just launched our AI Educators programme, and that's to help staff feel confident experimenting and reflecting on what works. And it's creating those safe spaces for academic colleagues to have a go, have a play. That's what I did when I first started using it and brought it in quite carefully and safely into my teaching. But to have those guardrails and to have that safety. And it's ever evolving. So our AI and Educator course, it's brilliant. So I'd recommend have a look at it, have a go at it, get on with it and enjoy it.
Absolutely. So one of the things I think are important is to kind of demystify and probably having, more courses about fundamentals of AI, what is AI in the first place, might be actually a good thing in the sense of, as I mentioned also in the beginning of the anthropomorphism, those are not really thinking machines.
Yeah,
those
absolutely.
are large language models are next token predictors. I think the demystification also helps such that we break this either fear or whatever sometimes posture we find ourselves in and to embrace it. From an institutional level, I think at the end of the day, institutions are human beings working in some sort of organization, and I think everyone is struggling with the same questions more or less on this topic. So if you have an advice to give to institutions that might feel they are falling behind in AI readiness and they don't necessarily know what to do to fill this gap and how to operate properly and navigate properly this AI-infused education environment?
Well, as you said at the beginning, it's fast moving. So I think everybody feels slightly left behind. So my advice would be just start small. but start now. Don't get left behind even more. So you don't need to do everything at once. So just begin with a pilot. Involve students early. Get them in, get them on board. Build your communities of practice, your early adopters. AI isn't a single project. It's an evolving capacity. So build it in from the get-go.
That's very useful. If we start looking forward to the future, try to have some final reflections. I know it is hard to predict what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years from now, given what's surprising us every single day. But how do you think, thinking of, for example, in the industry, engineers, software engineers, for example, and I don't know if it is a risk or opportunity or challenge or whatever, you name it, the fact that Claude Code or AI agents, code AI agents, are technically replacing lots of coding human resources necessary in teams. What used to take, for example, 10 engineers before, it might take much, much less. What used to be shipped in a month can be shipped in a few days due to AI. Now, from, say, even academic research perspective, what do you think is going to happen? How is this shift? Are we going to plateau at some point of time, or are we going to probably move faster into some sort of high-tech agora where there is no one is actually working and everyone is maybe debating philosophy?
Who knows? Who knows what the future looks like in this? But if we just focus then on looking ahead for 5-10 years and how we see the student experience changing, well, I think we'll see a genuine personalised learning experience. With AI tutors that adapt to each student's progress. So really personalising it. And then being supported by human mentors who bring the empathy, the challenge and the encouragement. So learning, therefore, will be far more flexible, more global, more connected, giving our students, our learners, a greater choice and agency in shaping their own journey. But the human element will remain at the heart of it. Belonging, purpose, shared experiences, not replace them, but helping us to create learning environments that are more inclusive, engaging, and deeply personal.
Absolutely, not replacing, but probably augmenting, helping is hopefully the way forward, hopefully, I'd say.
I definitely think AI will enhance those experiences, not replace them.
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, if you have, say, unlimited resources, suppose just to
have you got a good pot of cash I can have?
if you have no constraints whatsoever from resources or time perspective, what one bold AI in education initiative you would like to embark on tomorrow?
So if you have that magic money tree, let me know, because I think I'd build a global institute for ethical and equitable AI in education. So a space where universities, industry, business, policymakers could co-design the future of learning. We need that shared global effort to ensure AI benefits everybody, not just the few.
Absolutely, we're badly in need of that. A final note, do you have a message that you would leave for students, for staff, for policymakers about how we should navigate the AI education transformation or the AI-driven transformation in general, if you have any thoughts?
Ooh, good question. So AI gives us an extraordinary opportunity to rethink education, but trust, inclusion and purpose have to help guide this. So we shouldn't aim just to use AI effectively. We should educate a generation capable of using it wisely.
Absolutely. Thanks very much. That's the best way we could close this episode. Thank you very much for your time, Judy. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.